It wasn't easy. I'm from a working class background, a migrant family, the first in my gen to go to uni. I grew up on the council estate and I went to a state school. Those things make securing medical school unlikely. How unlikely? I realised when I stepped foot at uni. I went to a secondary school that was rough when I went. I don't know what it's like now. My parents knew this, knew the area, heard of the fights, and so on and so forth. So they wrapped me in cotton wool pretty much. I'd be driven to school by my dad and I'd be taken home by my uncles. So there was no room for anything to happen outside of school.
Getting into medical school was probably one of the best things to ever have happened to me. Second to meeting my wife, of course. To hear this story, we have to go back more than 10 years. And I know what you're thinking. I don't look it, but I am really that old. Let me tell you how it all happened. You see, I went to a secondary school in South London. I didn't go to a local one because my mum thought if I go there, it'd be too rough. I'll probably end up in a gang, and since all my friends and all my cousins were there, I'll probably get up to no good. And to be fair, looking back, I think she was probably right. Although at the time, I was too naive and angry to understand why I had to go to a school so far away from home with no friends or older cousins to look out for me. And before we move on, I just need to make it clear, I've never been the smartest cookie in the jar. I've always performed on average in all my exams. The first few years of school, I spent messing around, talking to my classmates, probably disturbing their classes. I never paid heed to any education or had any career paths in mind. But I did make a bunch of friends whom I'm very still close to today.
Inside of school, I was for sure someone who loved learning and developing. It's still at the core of me. My attention was always in class, on the subjects being taught, and I'd always give it my best. That's who I am. I've always had a self-motivated approach to learning. To illustrate this point, I remember there was a point when I was very introverted and I lacked a lot of confidence. But I actively took up drama, which I hated. It helped me a lot on my journey to where I am now. I did well, I got an A star, and I attribute a lot of my current confidence to my teacher from back then. Now as a kid, sure, I talk a lot, sometimes be a bit disruptive in class, get involved in weird incidences, but never in anything serious. It wasn't in me to fight or try smoking, drugs or anything like that. When it came to those serious things, I remember even the clever kids were doing it for a bit of fun. It was never the thought of getting caught, but disrespecting the efforts of my parents, their sacrifices and everything they've given me that warded me off. My love for my parents and desire to make them proud kept me on the straight and narrow. But to survive in schools like the one I went to, you'd have to know how to carry yourself and build relationships.
In our school, we had the usual run of bullies. Used to steal your money, pick on the innocent kids, but somehow I managed to get through it. I still remember though, one day while I was at year 7, the smallest kid on the block, a basketball hit my nose and it started bleeding. And I thought to myself, how on earth am I going to survive in this school for the next 5 years? Then things started to change when I was in year 9. A form teacher saw the potential in me and she recommended something that I will never forget. She said I should get myself a private tutor. And bear in mind, growing up in the council estates of London, this was an alien concept. No one knew the value a private tutor would bring. And I'm sure my dad was probably worrying how on earth he's going to pay week on week for a top tier tutor. But my parents have always been supportive of my education and they managed to make it work.
I wasn't friends per se with everyone, but I was cool with everyone. I wasn't a target, nor was I getting involved in targeting anyone at all. I remember I had this Nokia N91. It was a good phone. You could store 1 million songs on it. I used to hire it out to the goons, so they'd pay me, but also would have my back if anything happened. Or say when they struggled with topics, I would actually spend time teaching them on a peer-to-peer level. I still remember on a Saturday I was at this extra English class and there was this really motivated guy that was caught up in the wrong areas of life pretty much, but he wanted to do well in English. He asked me to teach him, so I did. And one day he turned up high. I remember bollocking him and telling him, look man, if you're serious, you better turn up so I can teach you properly. You can't even take anything in. This guy could knock me out within a second, by the way. What I'm trying to say is it's tough growing up in a state school. It's about survival and relationships as much as it is about learning. Being in a school like that, I'll be honest, I don't think it bodes well for the future. 30 students and 1 teacher. How can we expect quality education? It's sad to say it, but I won't shy from saying that.
Let me tell you about this tutor. His name was Babar. He was an investment banker working in the city, and his brother had recently moved to London, having graduated from Harvard with a maths degree. For the first time in my life, I was in a room full of some of the most smartest, ambitious, and highly driven people. Whereas in the community or in my local area, those that were successful were the ones driving fancy foreign cars, wearing designer brands. I was in awe of them. And they opened up my world, they opened up my horizon, showed me the power of education. If I stick to my education and do well, I can be successful like them. But let me tell you what the difference was between my tutor. He made education fun again. He made me engaged. He showed me how it has real world applications. I found it fascinating, especially as a young child. And he said to me, education is the ticket to freedom. With it, you can do whatever you want. And he soon went from my tutor to my first ever mentor.
You could pluck a student from a private or grammar school at secondary level, and they'd know what they want to become, how much they want to earn, what impact they want to have on the world. My environment taught you to desire cars, clothes, women, and try drugs. Ambition, impact the world, create a legacy, none of that existed. I coasted through secondary school, secured my A's and A stars, but that was it. There was no plan, just the next natural step. College. I went to, I think, a very good college. The teachers here were different, the classes were smaller. The students around me, some of them were different. Neurosurgeon, chemical engineer, physicist. These titles were being thrown around. My first day, I was asked, what do I want to become? The teacher looked at me, however, and said, the one thing I'll always remember, and I wish maybe if she's watching this right now that she could reach out and tell me if she meant it or she just hedged a bit, that what she would go on to say would motivate me. I said I wanted to become a doctor. Her reply was, be serious and realistic. Medicine is out of your reach. Even if I smashed the exams and got 100% and asked her, have I changed your mind yet? Are you going to support me? She still was adamant. Even if you get the grades, you won't make it in. That hit me. So I buried that dream within me. I never really actively told anyone that I'd want to become a doctor and needed support. Pharmacy was more attainable, so I actively pursued that.
Sticking around with him, I managed to do well in my GCSEs. And I started to entertain the idea of being a future doctor. I'd heard of this kid a few years older than me that managed to get himself into medical school and was now being a doctor. Despite never have met the guy, I was in awe of his story. But going to the school I did, I never really gave it much thought. Bear in mind, when I did apply to sixth forms, I got rejected from every single one. So I had to stay at my current school. Luckily, I managed my friends to stay with me. Sixth form was an amazing experience for me. I got to develop personally. I got more confident, got closer to my friends, and I think we all started to become a bit more ambitious and a bit more driven. A lot of them have done well. I went to school with Akil, who's the founder of MAR. I went to school with another close friend called Afzal, who went on to become an investment banker for Goldman Sachs and is now starting his own startup. But we were young and naive and never knew what the future would hold. In hindsight, I feel the path to medicine was laid out for me in one way or another. I just didn't really see it or believe it at the time. Things just naturally fell into place for me, and for that I'm eternally grateful.
And then my uncle spoke to me. He asked me, what do you want to become? I said, look, I want to become a doctor, but I don't think I'll become one. It's quite hard. So maybe a pharmacist, because I've got the grades that I need to get that place. His reply was, I asked you, what do you want to become? If it's a doctor, then that's it. Plan A, B, and C is to become a doctor. How you do it, that might change. That conversation won me, and I just grinded after that. One day at college, I was going home and I got robbed at knife point on the bus with people around me. They took a broken sellotaped phone. It was incredibly traumatic, and I did cry my eyes out all the way through Liverpool Street, all the way home, and I just spent the next couple of hours crying. But I remember saying, I'll never be like those guys. I've got the ticket of education. My parents sacrificed so much. I need to make it. And I need to become something and impact the world better. That was important to me. To impact the world better. To leave it better when I leave this earth. Now, I have to shout out some of my friends here. Tanvir, Sharia, Saeed, Imran, Rizwano. All of us kids grew up in the ends and the odds were stacked against us. But now today, we stand as doctors, pharmacists, teachers and analysts. But when I wanted to become a doctor, those guys were instrumental to me. The drive and support they gave me was something I couldn't buy. I remember when I landed the interview, I didn't have anyone to practice with. I mean, who'd want to practice with me? I probably landed that interview by luck. But these guys backed it for me on a different level. They practiced with me and sometimes even went extreme and excluded me from coming out with them and linking up and chilling out with them. I'm forever in their debt.
I was one of the first few to apply to medicine from my sixth form after a long time. And this meant my school wasn't really equipped for a student like me. Even navigating the UCAS was very difficult. We couldn't afford to go to any admission courses and we had to solely rely on online forums and word of mouth. However, we managed to apply and I heard back from a few of the medical schools, which was a massive shock to me. I ended up getting 2 interviews. The first interview was at St. George's and in all honesty, it was very difficult for me. I was a very poor public speaker. I was very nervous throughout the whole thing. I failed to grasp the concepts and understand what they were looking for me as an interviewee. But the one thing I did know, I really did want to become a doctor. And if I did get the chance, I'll grab it with both hands and work super hard for it. Guess what? I failed the interview and didn't get an offer. Then later on towards the year, as my hopes were starting to dwindle, I got an interview from King's. And let me tell you, I was ecstatic. I felt like I'd been given another chance. And once again, when you go to a school like the one I did, they never really train you, they never really prep you. So guess what? I rocked up to the interview wearing a baseball jacket and trainers. Lo and behold, I entered a room of very well polished individuals who were in the finest suits known to man. Nonetheless, I did the interview. I tried my best, trying to perform at each station, hoping my passion would come through and they'll notice that I really do want to be a doctor. I may not be from the same background as the rest of my peers, but I felt I had to give it a go. But I was absolutely fine with receiving a no. Who on earth will ever get into medical school with a background like me? I'm just here for the experience. Fast forward a few months, I finally received an email and it was from UCAS, that notification. And I know you're exactly been there and know what I'm talking about.
The day an offer landed, my uncles and cousins were at my house. I was in my room. I was just refreshing and refreshing and refreshing.
I open it up and I see this acceptance letter. I was euphoric. My whole world stopped. I felt as if I was in a whole new dimension, a whole new world. I erupted with joy. I ran around the house, told everyone, and I can still till today remember the joy on my dad's face. And it's funny, having graduated, I still feel the best moment was when I got that acceptance offer.
I was amongst the last to get the offer. Man, the days leading up to it, I was praying and just crying to Allah, please give me that ticket.
As I was waiting for Mum to get home, I finally broke the good news to her. Ever the pragmatic person she is, she sat me down and she said, look, you've been blessed with a great opportunity, so keep your head down and make the most of it. And since then, I've just been trying to do that. And that was the day I realized medical school was my freedom, my ticket to doing something great.
And suddenly I see offer. And I kid you not, tears just started to flow down my face. I can't explain the happiness. I got an offer. I ran to my mum and I told her. I rang my dad and told him, and I just dropped into prostration. I got the ticket to potentially become a doctor.